And the worst period for Martin guitars is generally considered to be in the 1970s. But my son Tim has a 1975 D28 that sounds great. You know, for whatever reason, that guitar has it's just an excellent sound.
Yeah.
But I've played others that were just like, oh, thank you, next, you know.
You know, I think what happened was they just got really inconsistent in the 70s because they were branching out into owning banjo companies and drum companies,
right.
worldwide, you know, band instruments,
They bought
all that kind
they
of
bought
stuff.
this Swedish guitar company named Levin, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And that, yeah, the man who was running the company at the time, I think it was Frank Henry Martin.
I think so. It was Chris's dad.
Chris's
dad. Uncle, wasn't it, or something?
His uncle.
Well, anyway, it was the previous generation.
Gosh, I should know that. I've got all these books, but
yeah,
he was into branching out into all kinds of. I mean, he was into race car driving. He was just, but he didn't really. It wasn't a focus. It was a focus to him.
They lost
to make,
focus. They absolutely.
Yeah, he wanted to make as many guitars and sell as many guitars as possible, and leverage.
Well, they started the cheap
name.
line, Sigma.
Right.
Too. That was also a 70s thing.
Yeah, so they spent more time concentrating on all these other interests that he had at the time, and the quality of the guitar suffered. And eventually, there was a strike at the Martin factory. Actually, the workers were just ready to all walk out.
Yeah.
And then he was eventually relieved of his command, so to speak, and given a severance package. And then the company began to pick itself up again and focus on what they did best, which is making really great acoustic guitars. And they did recover, but they almost didn't survive that. The result of all those various poor decisions.
Right, and they had the famous or infamous D76.
Oh God!
The limited edition 1776.
Yeah, the bicentennial Martin Dreadnought was basically a D35.
Right.
With stars on the fretboard, a little pearl eagle in the head. I knew a guy who had one.
Yeah.
And a three-piece back like a D35, but at the time, a D35 cost about $600.
Yeah.
This thing was $1,500.
Right. It was hard to justify. They're trying to build this collector's item and charge 2.5 times what they were charging for really the same guitar.
It was
Yeah.
It was kind of tacky, really.
Yeah. I remember when one showed up at the store I was teaching at the time, Union Grove Music in Los Gatos, because each dealer was also limited to only being able to get like one or two. So each dealer only had to sell one to to get rid of their quota or something. But it was they really tried to build in scarcity and.
Well, there was a big bicentennial mania thing going on at the time, and I think they built 1,776 of them.
Yeah, that was the deal.
And I don't think they're worth a lot now. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never seen one. Maybe you could go on eBay.
I guess we had to check it out. We'll do that in a
see
few
what
minutes.
they're going for, because a D35 from that period you can buy for, they're not really, guitars from the 70s aren't really collectible.
They're certainly not collectible.
They're not what I would call vintage instruments.
They're not bad guitars necessarily. Some of them are. That was the thing. Again, they were so inconsistent. I mean, we've seen at my friend's repair shop have seen guitars built in the 70s that had the bridge in the wrong place.
Oh,
you can't set the intonation because the bridge is not in the right place, and that escaped the factory.
Yeah.
But again, when Chris, who's now he's probably 50-ish now. He's like right around our age.
Yeah, he is.
And it seems like he's been running the company since he was like 25 or something. And really, I think has definitely put it back on track.
Yeah, he's turned it around. They really are doing very well now. They're making. I saw a thing with George Gruen, and I wish I could remember this a little better. But he said it took for Martin to build that. They built their 1 millionth guitar not long ago, in the last couple of years, and it took them, 170 odd years to get to 1 million guitars. But at the rate they're going now, they'll have 2 million just in a few years.
Right.
They're doing very well.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that, because I always had a very big soft spot for Martin guitars.
Yeah.
I've owned quite a number of them, and there's a lot of great guitars being built by a lot of great makers, but
this is like American history.
Yeah, it kind of is.
My partner Matt, my Totally Guitars partner, is currently just starting his search for his first vintage Martin, and he had a long post on the web just last night over Christmas or something of research he's done, and actually a lot of stuff that you talked about the hide glue and the 1934 introduction of Ds compared to the 1929 introduction of the OMs that they tried to make. That was actually the first thing they tried to get that you could compete with an orchestra with, and hence the name orchestra model.
Yeah.
Right? But anyway, so he put a whole little history of all the little changes that happened in Martin on one of our forum posts there, and a bunch of people, and he's let everybody know at Totally Guitars that he's on the search now for a highly collectible guitar. So we sort of put if you see anything in the near future, if you see a D28 from the 40s or something.
Looking for a dreadnought or a triple O, or does it have a size?
Not really. Really, I mean, he's just looking for his first cool vintage Martin.
Because a smaller body guitar will not. The dreadnoughts seem to be the most expensive as far as people wanting them from this period.
They seem to improve the most with age, as opposed to the smaller bodies a little bit too. I don't know if that's random, but there's some fine sounding. The smaller ones, really balance. You had that one like an 018 or something, or you had a really small guitar once.
I had a couple of them. I had a single odd 28 that was made in 1890.
Yeah.
And I wasn't supposed to be doing it, but I was using extra light bronze on it. And I didn't have that. I only had that guitar for about a year and a half. So but it worked fine with them. But I found since then you're really not supposed to use that. You should at least use silk and steel.
Something even lighter.
Which I don't really like the sound of silk and steel.
I know, they're pretty wimpy.
I wanted the phosphor
But that guitar
bronze.
was built for nylon strings.
It was.
So it's
gut.
Yeah.
And then later I had a single odd 42, which was a similar guitar. It was a little more upper end. It had pearl around. Style 42 was the second from the top at the time. But from the front, it looked pretty much like a Style 45, and it was from 1923, and that was the first year they were starting to brace guitars for steel strings. They weren't all made for steel strings at that time. By 1927, it was kind of a happy accident that Martin's construction that had evolved, the X bracing system that had evolved since the 1830s and 40s, was remarkably well suited to a steel string guitar.
Yeah.
A lot of classical players would go for this construction where it was fan braced, and they just for classical music were probably a better sound. But Martin really achieved their success. I mean, they were pretty successful in the 1800s even, but once steel strings came into vogue, their style of guitar building was just absolutely perfectly suited to it. It was just kind of no one could predict that.
They just lucked out.
They just lucked out, and then so by 1927, all their guitars were braced for steel strings, and eventually they offered models that were sort of like classical guitars, but they were never really very successful.
Yeah.
And gut string guitars. They even made a few that were like based on X bracing, and it looked like a Style 28 with a with 14 frets clear of the body, but it was, but this kind of funny classical guitar bridge where the strings would tie around, and they weren't very I don't know. They made very few. They weren't very successful, and they're not worth much to a collector because nobody wants them.
Right.
They were just not what people were looking for.
Yeah.
So they, but I just really am.
So did these inlays? Those original?
No, they're not.
Yeah, okay.
This guitar. You probably can't see it here, but would have had just dot inlays.
Right.
This one has a. And actually, he overdid it a little bit. What I really wanted
still
was
pretty subtle.
Yeah. What I really wanted was, for some reason at the time, I wanted the same inlay pattern, just the dots, but with the little slotted diamonds, which is what these are.
Ah, okay.
And I just wanted the 6, but for some reason he put in 8.
Oh, okay.
And I just kind of went, well, Frank, why'd you put in 8? And he goes, well, I don't know. I just guess I got carried away or something. But
this is Frank Ford?
It's Frank Ford at Griffin. Yeah. So he made a new fingerboard for it, because what happens to these guitars in the 1940s, during wartime, Martin was restricted on the amount of metal they could use. And so the tuners, these are not the originals, were plastic button units.
Oh yeah, those things crumbled.
Had no shims. Yeah, I still have them.
Yeah.
And like really incredibly cheesy like pot metal, for the gears, and they're pretty horrible sometimes. And now they make replicas of them. Waverly makes replicas. They're very good, high-quality tuners, but they look like the old ones.
Right.
These are Waverlys, and these are kind of more typical of what Martin was using in the 1930s. But you can get the plastic button ones for the people who really want their guitars to look exactly like the era it was made.
Wow.
So anyway, what happened with these guitars is they had an ebony bar in the neck. Rather than they had a metal T-bar, meaning if you laid it on its end and looked at it, it was shaped like a T. It had a, but then they... So that's what they had in the 1930s, and then in the early 1940s, they had restrictions on how much metal was available, so they used an ebony bar inside a mahogany neck, which didn't really...
Doesn't do much.
Doesn't do much.